Good morning, everybody. Hope you're sitting comfortably. Looks very comfortable. So for the next 30 minutes or so, we are going to take you on a journey of future-proofing AdTech. With me, I have Shantan Kirathedi, co-founder and SVP of AdTech and DSP providers at Ocient. We have Alice Beescroft, Global Strategy and Partnerships Director at Yahoo DSP. We have Indranil Katti.
Anil
Katti, beg your pardon, Chief Product Officer of Roqad, and Indranil Datta, Head of Data and Technology Solutions at Annalect. So firstly, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. And future-proofing AdTech might feel like quite a bold claim, especially for this early in the morning. But the reality is, agentic AI is coming at business operations at a speed much faster than most advertising infrastructure has been set up to handle. And the companies that are going to be successful are not necessarily the ones with the most advanced AI models, but the ones that are really investing in setting up the right infrastructure to enable data growth, speed, and identity trust at scale to truly maximize the opportunity of agentic AI. So today, we're going to be unpacking what does that mean for AdTech, where are the opportunities, and importantly, what's critical and urgent to get right and get right now. But before we jump into the conversation, if you could just take a moment to please introduce yourselves. And also, I think for the context of the audience, explain maybe a little bit, what does your day today look like? And Shantan, I'll start with you.
Sure. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending. So my name is Shantan Kirathedi. I'm one of the co-founders at Ocient. We are a data analytics and solutions company. We're really focused on, I'd say, achieving the best price performance for very large-scale analytics and AI initiatives. And so, of course, AdTech is a case where the data is very voluminous and very large AI and analytics initiatives. My day-to-day has become very exciting as we're working with clients going on this AI journey. I'm working with clients mainly right now to retool infrastructure for very large amounts of data, looking to reduce the costs and complexity of these workloads while achieving better performance. And I think one of the most interesting things that we're seeing right now is the democratization of data, not just for people, but for agents, and doing all that in a governed way. So really looking forward to this panel. And again, thank you all for attending.
Hi, I'm Alice. So I predominantly work on Yahoo DSP, but Yahoo is also a consumer-facing business as well. So the sort of focus that we have right now is firstly ensuring that there's a seamless experience for the consumers that are coming across to the Yahoo properties, and making certain that arguably AI is sort of threaded in without it being too, I suppose, apparent that it's there. But my day-to-day is very much focused on how can we actually partner with both the current companies, so for example, like the holdcos, the agencies, the data vendors, all the various different vendors that exist within the ecosystem, not just from a direct basis, but how can we actually further those integrations from an agentic perspective. There's also new kids on the block now. There are these new companies that are popping up that are providing almost like the agentic middleware and providing the connectivity between agencies, vendors, etc., that may not are potentially not able to move at the speed at which they would like to. And so how can we ensure that we can connect into those as well? So yeah, it's all about sort of furthering the performance and ROI for our clients by making the experience both in the DSP and our consumer properties more seamless.
Thank you, Alice. Anil?
Hi, I'm Anil, and I'm the Chief Product Officer of Roqad. And up until last summer, we were known as an identity resolution provider. And since August, we acquired another company called Zeotap Data. So with that, now we are in the business of audience activation across 20+ platforms. And we are one of the few onboarders of third-party audiences onto Amazon DSP. So my day-to-day looks like, so my remit is product, data partnerships, and customer operations as well. So I've been busy with, let's say, delivering on the cost synergy. So that's what I was busy with till yesterday. And now I need to prepare for a future, which is agentic. And then we're working with folks like Ocient to see how you can deliver the same proposition, but to a new world where agents are going to be accessing your products and data services in a privacy-compliant way.
Indranil.
Yeah, thank you. Really, happy to be a part of this panel. I work in Omnicom Media, part of Annalect. As you all probably know, Omnicom Media is very committed towards providing the best possible ROI for our clients through sales, communication, and transformation services. And within that landscape, my role is to essentially look at, how does MarTech, AdTech, and data solutions provide the intelligence layer underneath that kind of a media and marketing landscape that powers faster decisions and more accurate decisions in a better way. I work day to day with clients looking at, what are the different kind of technology and data choices do they have? What kind of, identity infrastructure they need to look at to be able to connect together multiple signals, high quality signals, to create those decisions and to activate those decisions in the fastest way possible. And that's kind of the challenge that keeps us waking up every morning.
Thank you, guys. So hopefully you can appreciate we have a lot of experience sat here today, and hopefully that will make for an interesting conversation. So let's get into it. I'd like to start firstly with giving a little bit, I guess, of a lay of the land, painting the landscape. We've mentioned in the start sort of data growth and privacy requirements. So let's sort of unpack what that actually means. And probably most of people in this audience, when we talk about, the opportunity of agentic advertising, we think about the front end, operational workflows, better efficiency, automation, and that tends to be sort of where the main focus is. But actually, there's another layer, probably one that hasn't had so much airtime until now, and that's really the infrastructure back end. And arguably, that's just as important, if not more, as we're seeing growth in data volumes and agent-to-agent activations really starting to happen. So, Shantan, I'm going to start with you. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing and what you're hearing from clients and prospects in terms of that growing ecosystem, the demands on data, and what does that world of agent to agent, what does that mean in terms of what needs to happen on the data front?
Okay, it's a great question. I'll talk about it from the lens of a couple opportunities that we're working with right now. So we're working with a client, as an example, that is pushing over 1 million impressions per second, and in that flow, each of the impressions has thousands of facets. Right? You're talking about campaign information, you're talking about identity information, audience contextual information. And so it's a massive amount of data, and it presents 3 challenges. I think number one is, of course, the volume of data. For agentic workloads, you're really looking to increase the sample size of the data. You're looking at increasing sampling size, not just for the accuracy of the agents, but also for compliance and for governance. So the amount of data is rapidly increasing. The second piece is really around the complexity of the environment. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing right now is the proliferation of these systems across the ecosystem. So you have all these orthogonal systems. You have systems in the cloud. You have systems, you have a clean room, you have a data lake, and then you have bespoke systems that different business units created. And the agents and their accuracy are only as good as the data layer and the semantic layer that you could build. And so this sprawl or proliferation of systems is really at the forefront of these initiatives and looking at consolidation. I think the third piece that I faced last night, I was building an agent for a video brand safety company. And what you find when you issue one of these agents, they issue a query, it's not just one query, right? They have to sample the data. Then they run some queries. Then they have to reason on the data. And so one query turns into 20, 25 queries. So it's incredibly important to bring that governance layer, but also the workload management, the resource limits, because in the future, you're going to have non-technical users generating these queries, and it's going to burden the system. So I think to kind of summarize, these AI missions are moving from experimentation into operations now. And so it's really important to have that really enterprise-grade back-end system well-defined.
To manage that. And I'm going to pull that thread of governance through, and Anil, ask you, what does that then manifest itself like in terms of privacy, compliance, and identity resolution?
Sure. So while we are relying on Shantan to deliver a fantastic infrastructure that scales to open our data and products to agents, we still, even if agents are out there, privacy laws don't change. Like, just 2-3 weeks back, I was at a panel at IIB Tech Lab in Berlin, and we had the data privacy regulators from Germany there. And they said, you can talk all about technology. Regulations don't change. You still need to have proof of consent, like, what did the user consent to, or the agent on behalf of the user consent to. So we are, that's what the governance layer comes in there. And if we expose our products to agentic queries, are we sure that the agent didn't break through the governance layer, the gates that we put in place? That's important. So, and the auditing capability of that. What was the agent had access to, what kind of data was provided, and when something happens that we are able to prove that, the data is consented, what was shared was, completely compliant with whatever policies are applicable for the country where we are doing it.
Thank you. So let's get a perspective, I guess, now from the buy side, because we've talked about growing data volumes and the need for agents to continue to operate within sort of the governance layers. But what does that mean, for you on the front end in terms of how are your businesses thinking about it? Where does that sit within your business? Alice, I'll start with you.
So I think the first thing is we've been thinking about it for the last couple of years. I mean, we've been rebuilding out our knowledge bases. We've been rebuilding out our sort of data infrastructure, very much focusing on sort of reducing our AWS costs, because we know that everything that you were just saying about the additional volume of queries and the additional amount of data that comes through. It's interesting, though, that you said that as we move into the future, we're going to be offering this out to non-operational people. We're already seeing that happening. We are speaking to the likes of Omnicom, to WPP, to a lot of the Indies agencies, and we're giving them access to our MCP servers already now. And we're training the non-operational teams up in a non-centralized, hey, just apologize versus asking permission. Hey, just go and check it out with Claude. Hey, here's a nice quick training session on how to start sort of querying our audience data, etc. So I think we're already in that path of non-operational people coming in, which definitely is a concern when it comes to like the data that they're accessing. The other thing I'd say from a governance layer, totally agree with you. I mean, come on, 4-letter word, GDPR, we're all living and breathing it. You've got Quebec, you've got new privacy laws coming into place in Australia later on in the year. I mean, they're literally popping up all over the place, which when you start working with sort of global clients, makes it incredibly complicated. And there is that concern about that governance aspects and is the data that they're accessing fully consented. You also have aspects of publishers, and I'm not going to name any, that don't want their data actually to be made available. And so we are seeing an increase coming from clients. They want access to log files. They want transparency. They want to know why. Why have these decisions been made? So that becomes quite problematic when it comes to the privacy aspect. But also what I would say is that sort of one of our sort of main sort of focuses right now is building in those frameworks to actually track and audit the AI logic that's taking place, both internally to ensure that we are actually meeting all the privacy guidelines and all of our sort of gating infrastructure is in place and is working, but also so that we are actually able to sort of take back to our clients actually why these decisions are actually being made, which then leads to even more data decisioning. So it's, yeah, but I'd say the journey started quite a while ago.
Thank you. Indranil?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate very, very much with, everything that you're saying, Alice. It just becomes manifold from our perspective because we are actually having to handle this complexity for multitude of global brand clients. And on top of having more data, disparate, privacy regulations that we need to be aware of, also the nature of the business for various of our brand clients means that the kind of data that we have to deal with is very, very different. Some of the brands may be very heavy on retail media, for example, and whereas some other clients, they would be more kind of, let's say account-based marketing based where, CRM is more important. Just to give you, a sense of how wide spectrum, differences do we have in terms of the data sets and the data signals that we have to handle. So for me, all of these, and of course, privacy risk essentially has boiled down to business risk for our clients, right? It actually means that they will lose real money and reputation if something goes wrong. So if you boil everything down for an agency, in an agency life, everything becomes a huge operational complexity for us. And that operational complexity is what we are trying to handle. That is one of the central areas that we are concentrating on. So how do we, after we acknowledge that, obviously we have to address it. So governance becomes absolutely very, very important. How do we essentially make sure that governance is built across the entire operations by design? That is a very important point. Then we are, concentrating on building intelligent automation, where the things like observability of the data, that you can essentially see how the data changes as it goes through the pipeline. How can we automate and make it very, very visible as much as possible? Because GDPR essentially ultimately says that as long as you can prove that you have tried to do the right thing and you've been transparent and you have a way to do something as soon as something has gone wrong, you are not probably going to be looked at as badly by the regulators. So we're trying to actually build in those principles in the design and the automation of all the work that we try to do. And then finally, there is also this area of trying to bring together multiple data sets and then connect so that, ultimately, to your point, Shantan, is that unless and until we can connect through those data sets, the AI or the agentic layer on top of that is not going to work very well, which is where we are getting pushed day and night by our clients. So, and that's where, partnerships like Roqad, partners, infrastructure providers like Ocient, where we can essentially trust, where that you are going to essentially deliver that value on top of which we can essentially build our service layer. That becomes very important.
I'm going to stay with you, Indranil, because I see a few agencies in the room, and you mentioned operational complexity and dealing with more data, and ultimately, that means investment. And agencies, holdcos, have for a long time been investing in data, but obviously, again, with that growth in volumes and growth in complexity, that investment has to scale. And How do you persuade your CFO that actually investing in data is a competitive moat versus a cost center? How do you balance that?
Well, it's for the long. I mean, it's one of the central challenges. Again, it's difficult because traditionally it has always been, within the agency, it has always been a challenge to, balance between cost and ROI. And across the industry, obviously margins are getting pushed downwards and all of that kind of stuff. So we have those challenges. I think where our clients essentially help in those kind of conversations. The kind of challenges that they're throwing at us is less about nowadays, like 10 years back, 15 years back, it was all about, can you get the best media deal for me, right? It is no longer the conversation. That is no longer the differentiation. It is all about, can you essentially create an intelligence layer for me that actually helps me take the right kind of decision, because the advantage of media buying, that is getting thinner and thinner. Pretty much, everybody has got access through programmatic and everywhere. So that's kind of eroded away. So the competitive advantage now is, can you get the most accurate data signals in the most reliable way? Of course, privacy safe, but also in the fastest possible way. Speed is very important right now. We are being pushed by some of our very advanced data-aware clients to even produce, performance dashboards multiple times a day, right? Which was unheard of even 5 years back in an agency land, right? And we are being able to do that through very, very judicious choice of how do we essentially set up the tech layer. And that's, and our CFOs now understand that, that's absolutely the key to be in the game.
Yeah, and I think that takes us really nicely to what does this actually mean for AdTech? And you talked about, really managing that margin and managing that cost. And Shantan, I'm going to bring this to you because one of the ways that AdTech companies are doing this is by trying to only work off sample data segments. So rather than accessing the whole data, they're sort of cutting that back and trying to limit that. How do you perceive that tactic? Have you seen clients doing that? What impact do you see that having?
Yeah, great question. So I think the data sampling is going through the roof. I had a client just last night turn on 100x of their audience segments, just start pumping it in. It saturated the network. But they're doing that, just like a lot of the organizations that we're seeing, to get more signal out of the data. In fintech, they're looking for alpha out of these like areas of signal where you didn't find those patterns before. So when you look at DSP, for example, they're increasing sampling so that maybe they're looking for premium users in certain campaigns or certain types of attributes that they hadn't seen before where they're underbidding. And so they're really looking for those grains, right? Conversely, same DSP is also looking for fraud cases where they are bidding on premium users where it might be, fraudulent activity and maybe they're overbidding. So the sampling rates are absolutely increasing. They're going through the roof. I think to Indranil's point, building the intelligence layer is the sexy thing, right? The thing that everyone wants to get to, but the systems are so fragmented right now that the data exists in so many different areas. And in AdTech, it's very data intensive, but it's also very time sensitive. And so the agents can't be acting on stale data. They can't be acting on partial data. And so not only as the sampling size increases, but the demands to consolidate and to really build this governance layer next to the data, and then building the performance layer and the intelligence layer on top is what's becoming in vogue these days.
Thank you. Anil, I'm going to come to you and talk a little bit about, obviously you've been through an acquisition, trying to bring together two companies with very heavy data infrastructures. Can you do that quickly enough to remain competitive? I mean, there's friction there for you.
Yeah, sure. So we acquired Zeotap in August. In about 4.5 months, we took them off the cloud and got them onto Ocean's infrastructure. And the landscape has changed since December. You have so much of help from Claude and these tools that it becomes so much easier to kind of converge your stack. Your developer velocity has just become so much faster. I think in future M&A speeds are going to be so fast, and I see it's unthinkable. Like, normally you do acquisitions and it's a 12, 18-month journey, right? In 4.5 months, we're done with that. We've integrated our stack now from just being an ID resolution provider. We've gone to activation, and together we're doing things we didn't used to do before. So the pace has definitely changed. So yes, 8 months back, people were not so confident about the delivery of these agents, and now it's leaps and bounds ahead. So yes, we can see the impact of that to the products and services that we offer to our customers. And I think and what's challenging is now the demand from our customers is also increased. It's not just about pushing audiences; it's about showing the outcomes, which is show the results. It's not about just impressions served. It's about what was the conversion, what were the match rates, and being able to deliver data that can be refreshed in these dashboards that he talked about, like every few hours at scale. Yeah, you can move fast now.
Yeah, so on that theme of moving fast, Alice, I'm going to come to you because you've sort of talked about the investment that Yahoo has been making for some time, or the foundations that Yahoo has been putting in place. Talk to me about how does that look like in terms of what your clients are coming to you and asking for? Are they also matching your progress with their own ambitions for AI execution? How does that balance out?
Oh, I've got to look in the room to see if there are any clients. Right. So I think we can look at clients from two different ways. I mean, clients are also agencies, so agencies themselves. And I would definitely say the conversations and the work we're having with the agencies are definitely what I would say more methodical and well thought out. It's very much more about that back-end infrastructure. How can we ensure that those governance layers are in place? How can we ensure that actually what it is that we're providing to them is actually what matters? And at the moment, it's about audience. It's about data. It's about data discovery. It's about being able to use that data to help with planning, also to be able to help it with activation. When it comes to brands, it's more about the performance. It's more about how can we actually be driving that better ROI. Obviously, agencies care about ROI and performance, but certainly like the more tactical day-to-day conversations we're having, it's how can we ensure that they have access to the data that they need to so that they understand actually what's happening. But all of that comes back down to is having like a good infrastructure. And one of the sort of big areas that we're focusing on is how can that data prevent ad fatigue? Because at the end of the day, our ultimate client is the consumer. It's about ensuring that there is a good experience for the consumer that's actually been exposed to the ads that are coming through, and ensuring that they're actually building that momentum and building that relationship with the brand. Other areas we are starting to look at, we are looking at, obviously data clean rooms. How can we actually start to make use more of the brand's own data? More and more brands, I think, are almost like having this awakening in the fact that they are sitting on probably the most powerful and the most useful data is actually their own data that they have on their consumers. So we're working with quite a lot of the large supermarkets, alcohol brands, payment companies from around the world to actually sort of surface that data up. But how can that be done in a privacy compliant do it in a privacy compliant way.
And I just on that point, actually, I want to bring in Indramil because Alice said brands and infrastructure, and oftentimes clients' own data isn't in the structure that it needs to be in order to enable some of the components that you're talking about. So how does that look from from where you sit? What journey are you taking your clients on to tidy up and clean up their data?
It used to be way more difficult, even if I say 24 months back. First things first, clients are really understanding that, they need to democratize the intelligence that they hold within their organization better. So they are much more keen to essentially, bring their data to bearing and, help us in that journey. So that is one major change that has happened. Of course, actually, I find it funny that, we are talking about infrastructure so much now. It used to be like if we were talking about 5 years back, the mandate was that let's not even talk about infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's not the sexy thing to talk about, right? You couldn't have put a single architecture diagram on an agency pitch deck. It's a no-no. You can't do that, right? I've lived through it, right? And now everybody's understanding in order to be able to exactly, solve these challenges that we are talking about, like how do we extract the best signals from clients' first-party data? Clients' first-party data sometimes will essentially fall short because by the very nature of it, it does not have as much scale many times as paid media channels would require. How do we essentially complement that with trusted second-party marketplaces, right? Then how do we essentially, and also some of our brands have the challenge of they really understand what the consumers do once they are within, the area of once they have started interacting with the brands, but who actually they are outside of the brand interactions. That's also an important aspect. So these are the kind of challenges that are thrown at us day and night to my team. And to be able to solve through those problems, data connectivity is a very important problem that we have to solve for. So that is some of the things that we are always looking for, smart solutions where we can essentially connect through multiple data sets in a reliable way, in a privacy-safe way, right? So data partners, identity partners are important. Clean room partnerships are very, very important. How do we essentially operationalize data collaboration at scale between our brands, between the providers like Yahoo and other data providers that bring in those kind of rich signals and create that data collaboration environment? These are some of the most advanced projects that we are doing within the agency group. Not all brands are at that point, but the brands that really understand that they have to go ahead and they have to essentially create this connected data set and nurture that as their main competitive advantage as they want to hold that one-to-one conversation with their consumer set. They are essentially investing in that. And we are working in very close collaboration with those kind of brands as well. Of course, things like governance is very important. As I continue to say, operational excellence is very, very important. We cannot and testing is very important. At every step of the way, we have to test things. You talked about, fragmentation and what does that mean in terms of AI. Of course, everybody's asking about. Yes, we are connecting all of these data sets, but can we essentially have agentic intelligence on top of it? A very, very dangerous trend that we are overcoming right now. It used to be there at least, even a few months back, is people would essentially just put a frontier LLM on top of whatever data you've got. And these frontier LLMs are so good that they would hallucinate so confidently that it's almost impossible to figure out what's right and what's wrong. So for that matter, we have essentially put very rigorous test harnesses at every step of the way. Every new data signal, data set that you bring in and connect through. And clean room infrastructure also is becoming so useful and sophisticated. You can do a lot of these things within the clean room environment nowadays.
Yeah,
so these are kind of things that we are, trying to do.
Thank you.
We're also, we're also starting to see sort of, there's a few companies starting to pop up that are actually providing native apps to brands to allow their data basically to be made available and connected through without even needing to go into a clean room. So really sort of taking that privacy aspect and that control aspect one step further again.
So, I mean, so much to consider there. And, we're only at the probably second layer of the onion. Shantan, I'm going to bring this back to you because for the people in this room, that's a lot. That's a lot to consider. That's a lot to be across. And obviously there's an urgency to look into this as well. But how do you remove some of that friction? How can you get started on this journey?
That's also a good question. It's fascinating.
Solve this for us, please.
Yeah. I'll give you the cookbook right now. It's fascinating hearing the panelists talk about kind of the real world journey, and we're all at the nascent stages. A couple things that I've been seeing. Number one, probably the most critical thing is that businesses are not buying. They're not buying workloads, right? They're not paying for workloads. They're paying for outcomes, period. And so if you're not able to prove that your, some new workload that you're taking to market is going to generate these outcomes, the financial outcomes, the revenue outcomes, it's going to be very challenging for a business to fund the project. Now, they're also pushing for rapid prototyping. Gartner, I love their presentations around just the financials. It's making the business case, the financial case is always quite interesting. And they really espouse this idea of fast prototyping, fast, putting in kill switches right away into your pilots. But really, you need to also think about what Ocient does in every one of our opportunities. We build the business case, the financial case, into the technical case. So our success criteria is stated in outcomes. It's not only stated in technical terms. And that gets the technical people that are designing the solutions on the same page. And I think probably the other big idea is really thinking about okay, I'm building this solution and it's going to work for the time being. But if you're really thinking about outcomes, you should also be thinking about the future state, which is my sampling size is probably going to go up 5x or 10x in the future. As Indranil was saying, like infrastructure was a 4-letter word, but now you really have to think about infrastructure, the effect of sampling, the effect of additional signal, the effect of removing data copies and consolidating on the future architecture. Because if your business is buying outcomes and you say a year from now, I need double the infrastructure and the resources, the people resources, that's certainly not tractable. The last thing I'll say really quickly is just that I have all of our clients, most of our clients on Slack, and I see almost like across the board, everybody is really scrambling to do undifferentiated work. They're managing pipelines, they're patching systems, they're doing work that I would call non-differentiated. It's not innovative. And so really it's incumbent upon the business to find ways in which to pull the innovators, the technical expertise into focusing on innovation. And we, Ocient, never really considered managed services and bringing our expertise, kind of like what Palantir does. But now it's almost required, right? We need to bring our expertise to the clients in order to help pull some of their most important people into these innovation projects.
And I know we haven't had a moment to touch on it, but fascinating that your expertise comes from outside the AdTech world, working in cybersecurity and finance. And in a moment, we're going to open up to the floor, so please do encourage questions around that. So just to wrap us up, a final sort of succinct word. Indranil, I'm going to start with you. Are we confident that AdTech is moving fast enough to future-proof itself?
I think I'm very hopeful. I think innovation is happening at speed. I think the dichotomy that we need to be also aware of is that AI innovation is actually happening at a much higher speed than infrastructure consolidation and innovation. I'm going to slightly disagree with you, Anil, here, because I think technically it's probably happening. It is easier now, but it's also the organizational silos that are also associated with infrastructure that's slowing it down. So I think the organizations that are going to win are going to look at AI adoption and innovation adoption is just not that, but it's going to it's going to think seriously about bringing the data and infrastructure together and think of it holistically as a overall transformation program that goes across people, process, platform, and data.
Thank you. Anil?
I think when we look at, it's an interesting time now. You see even standards are moving, faster. If, you see a rift in the industry, you have IAB, and now in parallel, you have an agentic advertising organization who's looking to disrupt that. So it seems like, what used to be standard with real-time bidding, all of that is that now there's confusion, there's chaos. It's because of the speed where some players want to move fast, and Yahoo is in that club as well. So they're in the AdCP part as well, and then we are monitoring both. So there's an evidence of the fact that, here's an opportunity to reshape this landscape, and it's happening faster than we would think. Yes.
Thank you. Alice?
Firstly, can I just say I'm really excited about it all. I'm actually a very good sort of like rah when it comes to AI and agentic. And like my 24-year-old who says she's still not actually been on any of the chat GBTs or anything. But looking at it from an ad tech perspective, I think it's moving incredibly quickly. And I think it's great that it's moving incredibly quickly. But from a company perspective, and I'm talking sort of holistically here across the whole of the ecosystem, if that data foundation is not robust, then what you need to be doing is actually focusing your time on actually rebuilding that out. Your eventual sort of, I suppose, your agentic, your AI promises and what it is that you're taking out to the market are only going to be as good as your underlying layers. And I don't necessarily know if companies are actually doing that. I see quite a lot of what I would call and Vinny, no, you cannot quote me on this. A lot of sort of what I would say AI connected layers that are being put on top. They're skimming the surface.
Yeah.
And if you're not actually getting everything robust underneath, eventually those are going to break.
Thank you.
You're not going to have the governance.
Yeah.
You're not going to have everything in place. The other thing, and I agree with what you've just said, I mean, gosh, this is exciting, isn't it? The whole of the ecosystem is being really chucked into disarray. Everything is open for sort of question right now. And I think what we're moving away from, certainly in the programmatic area, is there's no longer a one-size-fits-all. We're seeing like a complete reworking of what companies can and can't do. But what I am seeing is a lot of promising sort of forward motion, not just from agencies and brands and DSPs, etc., but actually agent-to-agent conversations happening between DSPs and vendors and sort of new infrastructures like what it is that you're bringing out to market. So it's moving incredibly quickly.
And you're excited about it.
And I am excited about it, yeah.
Shantan, final word to you.
Yeah, thank you. Also very excited. I couldn't have said it better than the panelists. I think experimentation is happening fast. I think the marketing is happening fast. The enterprise grade is not happening fast. Only, I think Gartner said 2 to 3% of organizations have built an enterprise grade AI solution. So my only guidance, pick a project where you can define the success criteria in terms of outcomes, right? That's something that can be funded, where it's a revenue outcome, whether it's a cost savings outcome, but make sure it's about an outcome, and then build your cookbook on top of that, right? Build your consolidation story, your governance story, your privacy story. And once you do that, then you have a templatized solution that you can rinse and repeat on and move quickly.
With that, thank you all very much. Please give them a warm round of applause. We will now be opening to questions, and I will leave you in the competent hands of Umesh. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm Kirsty from Ginger May, and the question that I had was around, you talked about data regulation, but is there any regulation that's coming around AI that people need to think about as well? Because we've got the EU AI Act, but I'd love to hear about that.
The only thing I would say from my side, I can't talk about the regulations that are coming in from a government perspective, but I can say that certainly at Yahoo, we have got like a separate team of people from our privacy and legal team that are actually looking at everything from an AI perspective, from algorithms to agents to absolutely everything, to determine where potential business risk might be. So I don't know if it's particularly clear cut right now from a regulatory perspective, especially because the regulations that are coming in are not specific to AdTech. They're sort of like in general. So I think my anticipation is there's going to be more that's going to be coming.
Yeah, in what we look at from a consent evidence perspective, we've always been married to TCF and frameworks that we have in place. We see in the US the landscape shifting a bit as well. So Kochava settled with FTC just about a few weeks back. The location data, they were battling it for a few years, and finally they've settled on the fact that as long as there's evidence of consent and you're taking off sensitive location, you're fine. So you see that, even in Trump's country, it's happening. And there's a major law that's currently, there's a case in the Supreme Court to look at geofencing and what does that mean. So there's from US, we here in Europe, we're used to this for now since GDPR was thrown at us, but the landscape is changing in the US as well. So I think that's happening. And as far as the AI regulation goes, yes, that regulations are out. We haven't seen any, cases yet. I think everybody's letting the industry experiment. And at some point in time, it'll come, and then we'll be asked to prove how did Claude figure out, this, and can you make it forget? That's not going to happen. So, yeah.
I would say there's definitely greater focus on data retention. And I would certainly say the length of time that data can be retained, that can actually be used within AI models, etc. We certainly are looking at internally. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a big focus on actually building out frameworks to be able to audit the AI decisions that are actually being made. So should the regulators come knocking, which touch wood, it won't happen, we actually have something robust to be able to turn around and show.
Thanks, Kirsty. Great question. Alistair, did you have your hand up?
Question for Chanton. What do you think are the key differences and similarities between the fintech world and the AdTech worlds are, if any?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I have a couple of fintech customers, and I think probably the biggest thing I'm seeing right now is just the sampling volumes, the crazy rate at which the sampling volumes are increasing. We have a client that is looking at, for example, market tick data. And so financial tick data, and in order to differentiate, they're looking for signal in minute elements. So now they're sampling the entire, for a given symbol, the entire state of the whole limit order book. So market by price, market by order, and down to the nanosecond epoch. So every symbol, every change to the order book down to the nanosecond, they're capturing all of that data and looking for this grain, right, where they can see, run a nearest neighbor calculation to figure out the change in the order book between nanoseconds. That's absolutely crazy to think about when you're talking about unleashing agents against that amount of data and finding those grains of truth. But I think cybersecurity is the same type of thing. The largest tier one telcos are requiring us to keep years worth of ground truth data and really looking for these patterns and these anomalies. So in almost every industry, I think it's certainly for compliance, certainly for security, but really now to create that alpha and to differentiate, they're really looking for these situations where I'm looking for premium users in this like small class of or this new set of attributes that others are not going to find, right? And to do that in a way that agents can interrogate the system, but that the agents are governed is a real it's a big challenge, but that's where the industry is heading.
Great question. Thanks, Alistair. Do we have any more questions in the room?
Thank you. Alex from Roqad. Since we have Indra, Anil, and Alice, just a quick question on the media buying aspect. So with agentic now, how has the way that agency buy media changed? And will sorry, Alice, I'm playing the devil advocate here, but are DSPs going to disappear? Or how do we reinvent themselves?
I don't think they're going to disappear. I think what we're seeing, the way that clients are interacting with them is definitely changing. I mean, we envisage as we go into sort of 2027 that probably about 40% of our customers are no longer even going to come into a DSP. They're certainly not going to be using our UI. Instead, they're going to be harnessing our MCP servers and are sort of becoming our, dare I say, our connected intelligence layer, which does have a good data foundation, by the way, our connected intelligence layer to allow them to do their planning, insights, and activation. But they'll still fundamentally be using what I would call like the supply access, the algorithms that we have, the data that we have, etc. But the sort of like the interaction with the DSP, yeah, it's going to change. 100% it's going to change. And I think if you're working within that buy-side landscape and you're not expecting that to happen, then you're slowly going to start to lose market share. The bit that where we're finding, and I think it's very pertinent for this entire conversation, is around whether or not the agents will be allowed to make all the decisions. I mean, we very much look at agentic as being agent plus human. And obviously, from an agency perspective, you have loads of liability clauses and things in place with your clients, that there has to be the ability to have all of that governance in place to make certain any decisioning that's being made can either be tracked back or is actually in the best interests of what it is that you're trying to achieve. So we are seeing hesitancy around allowing the agents to actually make budget movement decisions or potentially tactical decisions like shifting budget from CTV into audio, that type of stuff. But definitely around the sort of planning, insights, measurement, campaign setups, etc. Yeah, we expect a lot of clients to change.
That part of the operational cycle has already moved along drastically. If you think about, how people used to, plan media or, generate audience insights even 2 years back versus now has drastically changed. There is, obviously connected agentic workflow that, provides massive efficiency gain across all of the agency teams. If you specifically think about, the programmatic world and, where the overall kind of, programmatic technology landscape, as we currently know, that's absolutely going to evolve because the current ecosystem, and this is my belief, no one certainly knows what's going to happen because everything is changing at such a high speed, but the current model of programmatic is essentially built upon the concept of price differentiation and optimization, right? I think it's going to be much more nuanced than that, as we have seen with AdCPs and UCPs, the way it is getting, these protocols are getting designed, it's actually going to be much more meaningful than just price differentiation, right? and to some extent contextual targeting. That's what basically, if you look at the bit streams, those are the only two things, only two levers that you can essentially operate with right now. The challenge that I feel is that in order for us to get into a true globally scalable agent-to-agent interaction through which these a programmatic style buy would happen, there needs to be some sort of industry standardization, right? This will probably go a little bit into the rabbit hole, but if you think about a publisher who has adopted AdCP and a buyer who has adopted AdCP as well, the vectorization of the audience or the data that they have on both sides, who says that it's the same thing? A vectorization or a weight of 0.5 represented on the publisher side versus the buy side, if they're all both 0.5, it doesn't mean anything unless and until you have actually standardized the underlying protocol of vectorization of or the semantic layer, if you will. There is no standardization or industry standard of semantics right now, and that needs to happen if we need to essentially move towards a industry standard scale of programmatic buying. There are things that are happening in small scale, in one-to-one kind of partnership models within controlled environments right now, which is extremely exciting to essentially look at and learn from. But I think this space is going to change rapidly in that area.
I also think it offers great opportunity. I think right now, companies, agencies, brands, etc., are very sort of resource constrained. We're all resource constrained right now. Margins are being squeezed even further as well. And for the most part, you're no longer going to need to have teams trained up on like multiple different buy-side platforms. By actually being able to have those sort of single agents that sort of exist within the agency landscape, they're going to be able to do those communications with the multiple different buy-side platforms and equally the publisher side as well, which I actually think leads for opportunity for potentially more unique, dare I say, fragmented sort of buy-side platforms to start to pop up without them having the concern that how are they actually going to sell that into the agencies. So I think there's an opportunity that's going to come out of it, and potentially we're going to actually start to see the media budgets no longer just being funneled into potentially one or two players because of resource constraints or because of inability to be able to sort of get themselves trained up on the different platforms.
Shantan, this is really a question for you, I think. The industry is notoriously fragmented, and we have tech that's come in, which is relatively new. We have companies like Yahoo that have been around for years and years, that have been working on their stack, on what they're doing internally. But there's plenty that don't. How do they start? You mentioned earlier about creating your own cookbook. But financially, where do they start? Because what is the cost impact on this to businesses that have only just started on this journey, not very far, or quite frankly don't have the skill set within it to be able to make that change?
That's a tough question. I think it's interesting now when you see these small nascent players coming in and they're able to compete, right? And they compete very quickly. I think a lot of them are quick to create demonstrative assets and to pitch the AI solution. They could get funding very quickly because they talk about AI and the solutions that they're building. But I think one leg up is that they're able to be very tactically or be very focused on a particular area in which they can deliver an outcome very quickly. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. And from that perspective, being able to have access to data and to really be focused on a particular outcome in the AdTech Lumascape, right? the video brand safety example is a great one. It's a very, I wouldn't say it's a niche area, but it's a more defined area in which they can really go and create value for their end clients very quickly. But it's still, I think, very important to stay focused on the exact outcome you're trying to drive for your target audience, and then building the proper ecosystem to support that. Because as a company that is doing your Series A, Series B, if you haven't defined a solution that's going to take you through, the doubling or tripling of scale in the next year, you won't survive in 2 to 3 years. So it's always this balance between not putting in too much process and not figuring out like the 10-year roadmap of the enterprise grade solution. But if you're not looking, our CEO always says an AI year is like 3 months, right? And so if you're not looking at what the next year essentially a year looks like, where it's 4 AI years, it's going to be very challenging, right? In terms of keeping the infrastructure, keeping your costs low, and so on.
And we're working with Ocient to package all of this, to your point about costs, right? So we're looking at, they've got the infrastructure, we got our data on top, and all the privacy control environment to enable such nimble startups who don't have huge funding to enter this space. So we're working with we're trying to create an ecosystem where companies like NewPact can come in who are looking into cross DSP campaign control using agentic capability. We're working with WAD data in the US where reasoning graphs can be built on top of our data. So so we're trying to make a way where this infrastructure can be consumed in a cost-effective way that fits their business model.
That's a great point. I think the level of partnerships has gone up exponentially. You're taking advantage of an infrastructure, data solutions company like ours, with partnering with Roqad that has tremendous amount of domain expertise, already built a lot of the capabilities that an early stage player can build off of, and picking the right, like it's the new channel partner, right? Picking the right partners to deliver on the things that are, I don't want to call us a commodity, but that's how startups should be looking at the infrastructure piece and the managed service and the stuff that Ocient does really well. And similarly, the things that Roqad really does well, reinventing the wheel there doesn't make sense because they've already done that so many times.
Bill, did you have a question?
Yeah, a very quick question. Bill Swanson from Publisher Collective. So you covered off a little bit, but Shantan, you mentioned that sort of infrastructure is probably lagging in terms of speed. Are there any other areas in the AdTech space that you see being too slow? Is it in the SSP side, or maybe even publishers and the data that they're making available, DSPs apart from Yahoo? That's
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah. I think you echoed it. I think that I wouldn't call it. It's. I think an area that's moving fast is, again, just this idea of I'm going to stand up an MCP and I'm going to open up access and end of story, right? That's kind of, and I think what's moving slow is just the idea of how do I really harden this thing? How do I make it resilient? How do I ensure that I have collected the right information to justify or prove compliance, regulatory compliance? Those are the pieces that I think are moving slow. Everybody has a boss and everybody is essentially trying to prove that, hey, I've checked off a box and I've delivered some AI initiative. And I think what I feel is moving slow, we have an SSP client, and they came to us and they're saying, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you all are doing on your AI journey. We just stood up an MCP and we're opening access for people to do some, kicking the tires type thing. But, I know that one of their competitors is already much farther down the road in terms of an enterprise grade solution for one specific workload. And so I think that's the piece that I find is just moving too slowly. It's this idea of I need to prove that we're building our chatbot or some public facing demonstration of I've done something in AI, but you haven't proven in the organization that you've delivered an outcome that's moved the needle for the CFO.
I guess my question is more around the average media consumer turning on their TV, opening their phone, looking at websites. AdTech has obviously evolved over the years, and there's been changes to the internet in terms of ads on websites, monetization, data collection, the perception of our industry. So I guess my question is, what values, what sort of culture are you guys doing to ensure that we're doing this responsibly, collectively, and so there's a perception that we're not affecting media through the use of AI?
So yeah, I mean, things haven't changed from a privacy regulation point of view, right? So we still, even if we let agents let loose, hopefully not, on data, we want to be able to kind of make sure that the consented data is there. We are not showing the ads 15 times, even if you bought the shoe. So those things remain, and now the technology enables us to do that in a much more scalable way, in a more, and that's something that I think the industry would expect us to do, and that's what the promise of all this is enabling us to have, like Indranil said, low latency, much faster turnaround times, being able to control the frequency at which ads can be shown, and not have wastage of media. That's one.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to consumer trust at the end of the day, and I think that's been there 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and it's still there today. I think there's definitely a topic of conversation around creative, and whether or not that creative is AI built, completely AI, or there's an aspect of human design that's gone into it. So I do think that is a topic for the industry to determine whether or not there needs to be some level of explainer to the end user as to whether or not AI is being used. But otherwise, I mean, I think it comes down to, as long as there's a seamless experience and it's not infringing on their ability to enjoy the content. And obviously, with CTV, obviously the whole sort of ad, I mean, gosh, I think I saw the same Volkswagen ad probably about 60 times when Paul's ads first came out. But I think that's definitely evolved. But I don't necessarily think that's come down to AI. I think that's more down to how different channels and technology is starting to evolve. But I think the whole aspect of consumer trust, understanding ad fatigue is not a good thing because it doesn't drive good outcomes, is still all the same. I think the one bit is around creative, arguably.
Yeah, I might add, I don't have the AdTech experience of my fellow panelists, but as a consumer, maybe this is controversial, but I think there's some acceptance amongst most consumers that AI agents are harvesting your data every single place that it's available, and it's just assumed that that's happening, and I'm going to accept it because I can't control it, and at least I'll get less ad fatigue. I'll have a better experience. Conversely, regulations are changing almost instantly. I have, to Anil's earlier point, I have a client that is based in location data, and they're working with us on a new POC, and the POC stopped because a new regulation was announced state by state that changed the way in which they can collect location-based data and the privacy rules. And so because they hadn't already considered that, and now we're using agents to go and look at and predict what policy changes there may be. But because they hadn't predicted that, they're basically saying 70 to 80% of our business is going to change in the next 18 months. So I think on one hand, there's this notion of we're going to do it, we're going to follow the existing regulations, and people are just kind of okay with the fact that agents are going to be leveraging this information for a better experience. On the other hand, I think there's some awareness amongst companies that know the rules are very likely to change very quickly. And if you haven't built that in, your business is going to get severely disrupted. This is a major, multinational business, and one of their, many of their clients are going to disappear in the next 6 months because, they didn't anticipate the regulation.
It comes down to the value exchange, doesn't it?
Yes.
It comes down to if you think about what retail's doing, the way that they're harnessing AI, and the fact that they're making that experience a lot better within the silo in the walled garden of that particular site. I mean, people will accept that, and they will accept. I mean, everybody accepts what Amazon's doing. The amount of AI that they're bringing into that, and the fact I think they've got an agent now which can help predict what it is that you might potentially want off the back of an experience, etc. Now, for myself as a consumer, I love that. It saves me time, it makes it more relevant, etc. So I think it also comes down to the value exchange that's actually being brought.
I think just one probably aspect to add to this would be the way we think about this in Omnicom is just not about regulation compliance, but in fact, the team is called Privacy Compliance and Data Ethics Team.
Ours is called Paranoids.
Fair enough. So I think the reality about AI is that, honestly, regulation always happens in a retrospective way, and we just don't know enough about what can go wrong. So one of the very important job is to be a keen observer of what's going on and do as much as possible, and most importantly, to keep that data ethics, that ethical point in view, which we always do in terms of the transparency, in terms of not doing the wrong thing. And one of the acid tests of it is, if you feel like you have to ask a question of, is this right? It's probably a wrong use of data. So if we think about it that way, I think we are doing pretty good.